Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After you run through the news you need to know about, we run you through the fan Q&A, where we answer fans' questions. We have a lot to talk about. I mean, an absurd amount. We're probably not going to do free agents this episode. We're going to have to do that for another day, because there's so much to talk about in this episode. It's insane. It's kind of crazy how much Dolphins news that we have to discuss. Not to mention the fact that, we have an offensive coordinator situation we have to talk about too. So let's talk about this first news story. This first news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. And this is the oldest one, so I guess we'll start with this. Tua is the Dolphins starting quarterback for the 2021 season. This is what Chris Grier said in his State of the Dolphins press conference that they do after every single season has ended. Chris said, quote, "Tua we're very happy with. He's our starting quarterback." And he said that multiple times throughout the press conference. He did say, though, I think it is an interesting nugget, because I've seen some other people talk about the Deshaun Watson situation, saying, well, Chris said this. Well, Chris also said, when he was asked the question, when you evaluate all positions and try to get better at all positions, does that also include the quarterback? He said yes. So he also said that in the press conference. So I think, I've said enough about Tua over the last two podcasts. I feel like I've always loved Tua. I love his game. I think the system didn't really fit him, and the personnel obviously wasn't good enough. I don't care who the quarterback was. Even when Ryan Fitzpatrick was in there, I already knew. I knew. We had some of the same complaints. We didn't have a slot receiver. We needed more deep threat ability than we had to take more shots downfield. Anytime we ever took shots downfield, it was more 50-50 balls, all that stuff. We didn't get a lot of separation down the field. And Jakeem Grant has proven over his tenure with the Dolphins that he is not that. So there was a lot of issues with the personnel. The running back situation was kind of in and out. Myles Gaskin really provided a lot when he was in the game, not just running the football, but also catching it out of the backfield. So there were personnel issues, there were schematic issues with Tua, and hopefully those things get fixed, which we're going to talk about my favorite candidate for offensive coordinator later in the show. But I believe in Tua. I think he's going to be a great player. No doubt in my mind. Now, how great he will be, we'll have to see. But, more and more, I watched the All-22 of the Bills game. I've watched since I've done some other videos, since I did the video on Deshaun Watson, I've watched some stuff. It's a lot less concerning when you actually watch it with the All-22 and stuff. It's not, a lot of it isn't on him. And I'm not saying that as a Dolphins fan. I'm not being biased at all. I would tell you if he had a lot of issues. I think the one thing I saw in the Bills game was there were times where he did struggle. I don't know if it was because he was in Buffalo, because I didn't see this the entire season, but there were two throws in that game where he struggled to kind of drive the ball a little bit and lost control of it. There were other times where he did drive the ball over the middle in between three people, and Isaiah Ford just couldn't come down with the pass. So there was a little bit of that, but other than that, there's maybe one or two bad reads in that game. It wasn't as bad as the stat line would tell you. But nonetheless, I believe in Tua. I'm excited about the future. We got 2 first-round picks. We have a lot of cap space. And I'm excited to see who the offense coordinator will be, because I think that's a big step in Tua's growth and how we're going to build the offense. So we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I believe in Tua. I'm happy. Always have been. Love Tua's game. And this next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Probably should have started with this one, but Chan Gailey has resigned from being the Dolphins' offensive coordinator. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. He has resigned, and everyone knows that who's listened to the podcast. I don't think we talked about this on last. Well, we didn't, because this happened way after. So my thoughts on this are the same thing with Tua. I think Chan does get kind of a bad rap. I loved some of the red zone stuff he did. His screen game is actually good. Sometimes we just didn't execute it the right way, but anytime he did some of those things, it was a good play design, and it was a good play call. He has a good feel for the game. I think we kind of gave him sort of a bad rap because of the lack of talent on the offense side of the football, especially when Preston got hurt. He dealt with a lot of stuff. I mean, Devontae Parker missed a lot of the games in December. We were without a lot of people. I mean, in that Raiders game, it was pretty rough. It was pretty rough. I mean, Myles Gaskin was probably the best receiving threat, to be honest with you, in that game, other than Mike Gesicki. And Lynn Bowden, who was kind of coming on strong at the end of the year, but he's more of a possession receiver than he is anything else. So I think Chan Gailey, although I was unhappy with some of his conservative game plans, and some of his game plans didn't seem very, I don't know, kind of guided. They didn't really have. It didn't seem like there was a real theme to some of those game plans at times. I do think he does get kind of a bad rap because he didn't have a run game until the end of the year, which I'm excited about because the run game started to kind of get going. My point is, I think Chan kind of got a bad rap in some ways, but he was not perfect. He had a lot of issues as well. And again, I think some of those conservative game plans were due to the fact that we didn't have a lot to throw to. And if we did make it a shotgun pass 40 times a game, I don't know how many times we would have won those games, but I definitely think we would have had better results offensively if we kind of played to his strengths, or even when Fitz was in the game with some of that up-tempo stuff. So there were those issues as well. But anyway, my point is, you hear everybody just crap on Chan Gailey. I wanted to say, he did kind of get a little bit of a bad rap because the personnel wasn't there. It really wasn't. And we've talked about that a lot on this channel. This next news story is something that I've already talked about in another video that I actually deleted because I wasn't very happy with the video. And there's a lot here, and more than you can I wanted to add this into the podcast because it's a big discussion. But we're going to talk about it as quickly as we can because I'm sure you guys are sick and tired of hearing about it. But this next news story comes from Pro Football Members. Deshaun Watson reportedly unhappy and considering a trade demand. He has allegedly has discussed with his teammates. You guys know the story already. I don't have to go down through the article. Will the Dolphins do this? The proposed trade is obviously to include Tua in that trade with the 2 first-round picks. I think Deshaun Watson is so good you would have to make that trade. I think the Dolphins have enough in free agency that they could still get weapons around Deshaun Watson. They still have a ton of later-round picks. I don't think they're going to have to give up any second-round picks in a trade like that when you're trading Tua and 2 first-round picks. I also could not find the article, but someone had made a very good article breaking down the cap situation if Deshaun Watson was traded to the Dolphins, because that's something I left out of my previous video, and I wanted to include in this podcast, but I could not find the article. But from what I remember from the article, the Texans would pay most of his salary the first year he is a Dolphin. So the cap hit the first year in the 2021 season would be pretty much nothing. But the following years, the Dolphins would have to pay, obviously, his salary in full. So that would be kind of a positive for trading for Deshaun Watson, is you're not going to have to pay a lot the first season of his deal. And you could still go out there and get some free agents to build around him. But the cap situation, you would have to pay, he's the second highest paid quarterback in the league right now, I believe. So you would have to take on some of those cap responsibilities as his contract goes further. Not to mention the Dolphins have another situation regarding to the salary cap and money we're going to talk about here in a second with Xavier Howard that's a little concerning. So there is something to that. I do agree with that, but at the same time you're paying for a top 4 quarterback in the NFL. So if I was the GM of the Dolphins, there's no way I wouldn't make that trade, and it has nothing to do with Tua. And I know people will, that means you don't really believe in Tua. I do believe in Tua, and I do think he's going to be or will become a great quarterback. I don't know if he'll be top 5. I hope to God he will be, but that's the hope part. I already know Deshaun Watson's a top 5 quarterback, so if you give me the opportunity to get someone that's that good, guaranteed, then I will do it for sure. Deshaun Watson is an amazing quarterback. Not to mention the fact that this team already won 10 games. Yes, there's deficiencies on the offensive side of the ball. I think the offensive line is going to get better. I keep hearing people say that the offensive line is poor. It's not poor. The run game actually was really going somewhere at the end of the season last year. It was actually starting to get going a little bit. So I think that is going to be improved. And I think whoever comes in next, this offensive line, will be better. Because I think some of the stuff that we were doing offensively in the run game, where we pulled Solomon Kinley a lot, he's clearly not very athletic. He's more, again, I think we should be more of a power running game than we are. So I think those aspects will get better as well. But I think the offensive line is going to be fine. I think it's going to be just even better than it was this year. You guys got to remember they were rookies. So yeah, I think what were we talking about? We're talking about Deshaun Watson. So yeah, I think it would be a good deal all the way around. And like I said, he's going to a contender in the AFC as well. You're adding a top 5 quarterback to it. So I would, if it somehow came to it and the Dolphins did do it, they did trade for Deshaun Watson, I think it would be good for the franchise, in my opinion. So let's move on from that. And let's get into this next news story. So here are some of the Dolphins' unrestricted free agents. Ryan Fitzpatrick, we're just going to run through these in case you guys don't know. So these are the unrestricted free agents for the 2021 offseason. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Matt Breida, Grugier Hill, Ted Karras, Vince Beagle, Matt Hawk, Landon Roberts, Kayvon Frazier, DeAndre Washington, Isaiah Ford, Matt Collins, Julian Davenport, Devon Godshaw, Adam Pankey. Those are your unrestricted free agents. Here are your restricted free agents. Jamal Perry, Nick Needham. Or these are your exclusive rights free agents, excuse me. Jamal Perry and Nick Needham. The restricted free agents are just Jake Rudock. Who cares? So out of the free agent, this is not actually as bad as I thought it was going to be. This is most of these guys I don't want back. So here's who I don't want back. Isaiah Ford, I'm good with. I would say Matt Breida, I'm fine if he leaves. Fitz, I could take him or leave him. Really, it's not going to kill me if he leaves. I love Fitz though. Don't get me wrong. Fitz gave us 2 pretty solid years. I think the guys that we have to keep on this list, I want to keep Vince Beagle. I want to keep Matt Hawk and Landon Roberts. I think those 3. And Matt Collins for special teams, I think is nice, but it's not the worst thing in the world if he leaves. And I like Grugier Hill too. I think he's a good special teams player, and I think he's also a very good coverage linebacker in certain packages. So there are some guys on that list. I don't think anybody here is going to just completely destroy the team if they leave, other than Landon. I really like Landon. I think Vince Beagle's got a bright future in this scheme, and Ted Karras I like a lot. So I think those 3 are probably my top 3, Vince Beagle, Landon Roberts, and Ted. I think I would like to keep for sure. I think those are the 3 I would like to keep. Everyone else, I think we would be fine if we lost them. But there are some other guys on that list that, I wouldn't mind keeping. But Isaiah Ford can take the next train out as fast as possible. So those are we'll run down one more time. These are your unrestricted free agents. Fitz, Matt Breida, Grugier Hill, Ted Karras, Vince Beagle, Matt Hawk, Landon Roberts, Kayvon Frazier, DeAndre Washington, Isaiah Ford, Matt Collins, Julian Davenport, Devon Godshaw, and Adam Pankey. Those are your unrestricted free agents of the 2021 season. It's not the craziest list in the world, but there are some good players on that list. Let's see here. This is another interesting news story. The Dolphins are set to coach in the 2021 Senior Bowl, so that's going to be cool. That Chris Greer and B-Flow are going to get an up-close look at some of these guys coming in. It's going to be a hard class to evaluate because of the weird circumstances with the COVID situation. So it's going to be interesting to see what they take away from that game. I'm surprised they're even doing a Senior Bowl this year, to be honest with you. I guess they're actually going to play a game, too, so that's pretty crazy. I wonder how the Combine's going to work. Weird, but it's going to be interesting to see what they take away from that game. All right, these last 2 news stories are pretty interesting. Dolphins cornerback Xavier Howard. This comes from Dolphins Wire. Dolphins cornerback Xavier Howard swaps agents ahead of the 2021 season. X has made it very public that he wants a contract, renegotiate his contract because he is no longer one of the top 5 highest paid corners, and he deserves to be. The agent that he just recently hired also was the agent for Olivier Vernon. Paul Soliai and Sean Smith, who are all former Dolphins. When he became their agents, they left, which is not, I guess, a good omen, you could say. But I don't think X is going to leave. He's a first-team All-Pro. Hopefully he wins Defensive Player of the Year, although the way Aaron Donald finished the season, probably not. But he still was a first-team All-Pro. I wonder who was the last first-team All-Pro for the Dolphins? If somebody could put that on the comment section below, if you guys know that offhand. Maybe it was Jake Long. Probably was Jake Long, actually. But, yeah, I don't think the Dolphins are going to get rid of X. I don't think this news story means anything. I don't care if this guy represented Paul Soliai and Sean Smith and who else did he represent? Olivier Vernon. Who the article also, I forgot to bring this up, is actually important. Did bring up that what was I? I'm losing my train of thought here. The article also brought up that he may consider an off-season holdout. But they said that was very unlikely that it'll actually come to that. So we'll see how this whole thing ends up shaking out. But I don't even hope. I know that he'll become, I'm sure they'll renegotiate the contract. I'm sure that he'll be a Dolphin for a pretty long time. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this podcast. This is what I was excited to talk about. This is what I was very excited to talk about. The offensive coordinator situation. Now this is an interesting situation. So before this news came out today that Doug Peterson was fired, I was having a very hard time thinking of candidates that I actually liked, because none of these guys, I really care for. Like one of the main candidates was Bill O'Brien. The last thing the Dolphins need is Bill O'Brien. Okay? Like, I don't think his offense really fits. I mean, it's New England-ish. Maybe it gets even more New England if he comes here, which I guess would be a good fit for Tua. It would be a good fit for Tua. They're going to have to find a slot receiver if they run that offense, though. But the point is, I wasn't, ecstatic about any of those names. But this particular name, I'm interested to see if the Dolphins pursue. Obviously, Doug Peterson was quit/fired from the Eagles. It probably had a lot to do with Carson Wentz, I would assume, and trying to retain him, but it's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about Doug Peterson. I think Doug would be the best possible outcome for the Dolphins. Here's some things that people forget about Doug Peterson. He comes from the Andy Reid coaching tree. Okay, so that in itself is a great thing, because I think that offense fits Tua perfectly. I mean, Alex Smith was the first half of his last season with the Chiefs, he was the front runner for MVP. And Alex is obviously more of a quick game guy. He's not really a down the field dude. Tua, I think, has better traits than Alex Smith, and is going to be a better quarterback than Alex Smith, in my opinion. I mean, I think he will be. So the offense really fits Tua, because the best thing that Tua does is get the ball out of his hands quick and read defenses at a quick pace. Plus, Andy Reid's offense is young quarterback friendly. We've seen it. I mean, Mitchell Trubisky had some success in this offense early in his career. Patrick Mahomes had a lot of success, obviously. Obviously has a lot of skill positions around him, but it has success as a young player. Donovan McNabb, I mean, the list goes on and on with all the young players that have had success in this type of an offense. So I think it would fit Tua perfectly. I mean, the traditional, West Coast, all that, get the ball out of your hands quick, a lot of motion, a lot of really unique RPOs too that Tua, apparently, what Chan said Tua likes to run, and he did run a lot of those in Alabama. So I think the offensive system and the philosophy fits Tua perfectly. And I would love, if we couldn't get a Sean Payton style offense, I think this is the next best thing for Tua. And I would love to build an offense around that scheme to run with Tua. And I think Doug is a very good head coach. He was a very good offensive coordinator. He was a very good head coach. He won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. He's been very limited, I think, the last 2 seasons, especially with some of the personnel, and I think you can kind of see that with how some of the offense is kind of a little bit stagnant with some of the stuff that they've had to work with down there. But I think with the 2 first-round picks we have and the free agency money that we have, and Doug Peterson, I think that's just a great. Plus, obviously, Doug was a backup quarterback here in Miami for a hot minute. So I like that marriage between him and Tua. I think it fits to his skill set. I think he's a great play caller. I would love to build an offense in that scheme. It's a very new age scheme as well. It's not, a dinosaur age scheme. One other thing I love about that offense is there's a lot of sets. There's a lot of personnel groupings and sets, which is what I love about Sean Payton's offense. They're in a different formations a lot. There's a lot of motioning. There's a lot of creativity involved in that offense. And like I said, I think it fits Tua perfectly. And I think Doug, his pedigree, coaching in big games, winning division titles, I think him as an offensive coordinator, I think would be, like I said, a great marriage. The experience, all that. Would love for him to return to Miami as an offensive coordinator. If he doesn't get a head coach, I doubt he'll get a head coaching job for the debacle that happened at the end of the year with the Jalen Hurts. But, reportedly that wasn't his idea. That's apparently one of the reasons he quit / got fired, was he was sick of people telling him what to do, was what was reported when he was fired. So I think and Doug, obviously he was with Mike Holmgren for a while and Andy Reid in Green Bay as a backup quarterback. He's got a great around John Gruden a lot. I just love where he comes from in terms of his football lineage and stuff like that. I think his knowledge, I love the scheme, the philosophy. I think it fits Tua perfectly, and I would love to build an offense around that. And I think he would be perfect. So hopefully the Dolphins get him. I would be out of the world happy if Doug Peterson was the next offense coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. And this is another report that we have to talk about. The Dolphins have set up multiple. This comes from Bleacher Report. Let me read this for you guys here. Let me get the exact quote. Sorry, guys. Okay, here we go. This comes from Armando Salguero's Twitter. Dolphins scheduled to conduct offensive coordinator interviews this week. Multiple interviews set. First time Brian Flores goes this route. He came to Miami with Chad O'Shea, and last year simply replaced Chad with Chan instead of big search with multiple interviews. So they're not hiring in-house. We've seen some reports that they could hire Eric Studesville or Studesville, however you say his name, and the other coach, I think it was our tight ends coach, I believe, that would get some serious consideration internally. That's not going to happen with him setting up all these interviews outside of the building. I think Doug is the best one we could get. I think he fits everything that we would want in an offensive coordinator. So I think that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's like almost half an hour of news and speculation. There's a lot there. There's a lot of there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. This offseason is going to be insane. It really is. It's really going to be crazy. All right. Let's get into the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. This question comes from KC Fanatic. He says, "Hey Skaggs, thank you for the podcast. I appreciate that." He says, "It was a good season. I believe we are heading in the right direction. We need the tackle from Oregon, a defensive player with the next pick, and Najee Harris with the third pick. Your thoughts?" Well, I like the tackle pick. I'm kind of warming up to that pick a little bit, even though I wouldn't do that. If it was me, I would definitely draft Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith with that pick, and I might even get Jalen Waddle, trade back into the first round and just pick Jalen Waddle, if it were me, and then get Najee Harris with the second pick. If that, to me, getting 3 skill position players would be, I don't know, ideal in my opinion. I just don't think. I think the offensive line is getting better, and if you do draft Swell, he's gonna have to play tackle. I'm not picking up with the third pick overall a guard. I'm not doing that. He's gonna have to play tackle. So that means Robert Hunt, I guess, is the one I would move inside. Austin Jackson cannot be a guard. Austin is he's what he does best is as a pass protector. He's not a physical run blocker at all. And I think, again, he's a tackle. I'm glad the best thing he does is protect the quarterback. So I think he would have to play right tackle with Robert Hunt moving inside, which does protect Tua's blind side. So I'm not against it, but that's not what I would do. I think I would definitely go for Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith, in my opinion. And I would not pick a defensive player in the first round. And I don't think this is a very good defensive draft, especially if you get him if you pick with the second first round. If you were picking a defensive player with the second first round pick that we have, which is at 18, I don't think this defensive draft is that good, at least from what I've seen so far. I haven't looked at it enough yet, but from the stuff that I've seen, I'm just not, unless you want a corner in the first round, the pass rushers are not that, they're not like someone, I'm like, oh my God, this guy's great. There's, especially at 18. I think most of the great players that you're going to find in the first round are going to be offensive players, like Najee Harris, that you could get at 18, or even maybe Jalen Waddle at 18. I don't think you can get someone that's going to make that big of an impact defensively in the first round. I just don't think you can, especially at 18. I don't think you're going to get what you really want out of that. So, to me, going all offense in the first round, I think, is the move. I think this draft is way more offensive heavy than it is defense, in terms of the depth especially. I think there's some good secondary guys in the second round that you could get, but I don't know about the first round. I mean, the two first round guys that I could take was Surtain and the corner from LSU. But after that, I'm not very confident that anyone else is going to be worthy of the 18th pick of the defense. Like, I'm not going to be sold defensively at 18. I think, like, Najee Harris, if you can get Najee Harris, who in any other era of the NFL is a top 10 pick, at 18, that's a steal. If you can get Jalen Waddle at the 18th pick, and let's say you get Doug Peterson, and he could be our Tyreek Hill, I mean, that's a dream come true. So, I think that, to me, is the best way to go with that. Let me scroll back up. Alright, this next question comes from Beef. He says, "Hey Skaggs, unless we haven't talked about it, what are your thoughts on the departure of Chan Gailey? Do you think it's Tua's fault at all, or did you think he wanted to go back to retirement?" I mean, he said one of the reasons he resigned was because of the COVID situation. He really didn't enjoy coaching in that environment. Who would, really? So, apparently that had a lot to do with it. But no, I don't think it's Tua's fault. I think Chan does, to me, I think, is the fact that we just did not have that great of an offense in terms of talent at the skill positions, and we really didn't have a run game at the beginning of the year. I think that for most of the year until really December, we didn't have a run game. I think 60% of it is that why some of the play calling and some of the game plans weren't that great. Even though when Fitz came in, don't get me wrong, the tempo was different. We were a pass first team, which is what we should have been, and we never really gave two of the keys to that car, especially earlier on. But we were playing great defense, we were managing the game, all that stuff. I get it. But I think Chan does sort of get a little bit of a bad rap because of that. And I think the 40% is just Chan being a little too conservative, not really having a vision for what he wants the offense to be in terms of identity. He flipped the identity way too much. When Tua was in, it was a run-first bootleg, super conservative game plan. Which when Fitz was in, it was completely different. And maybe you can argue against maybe the Raiders game, it wasn't very different. But every other game, I promise you, like the Chargers game, the Rams game, the New England game, a lot of those game plans were vastly different than when Fitz is in the game. So, sorry guys. Like I said, I think it's 60%, not the greatest offensive roster in the world. 40% was Chan and some of the stuff that he did. This next question comes from Beef. He says, "Skaggs, this huge rumor about the Dolphins trading Tua for Deshaun Watson sounds very enticing to a lot of fans. He says, if Watson, I'm trying to click read more here. If Watson is asking for a lot of money, that's a big no. Well, he's not asking for money. He's already got his contract. That's a big no because of our history with paying a lot of money for big players, unless we haven't talked about it. What's your opinion on this rumor and the possibility of Brian Flores making this move?" If it presents itself, like I said, I think it's great for the organization. Now, the point that you bring up that the Dolphins have had their track record with paying a lot of money to big time players like Mike Wallace or Ndamukong Suh or Carlos Dansby or Kevin Burnett, Philip Wheeler, Darnell Ellerbe. Some of those recent free agents that have not panned out, those guys aren't quarterbacks, and those guys aren't top 5 at their position. Suh was an interior defensive lineman. So we're talking about a quarterback who's 25 years old who is probably going to go to the Hall of Fame if he keeps playing like he is right now. Yeah, it's a completely different situation. And like I said, most of the money of his deal would be paid by the Texans in the first season, and then the rest of the deal, obviously, the Dolphins would have to take that on. But and not only that, one of the thing that I thought was interesting that was also brought up in that article, I cannot remember the name of the article, that was also brought up in the article, even though the Dolphins would have to pay his salary for the rest of the contract, the cap goes way up, and the Dolphins have a ton, unless they sign a bunch of free agents, which maybe it's 1 or 2, but the Dolphins still will have cap space in year 2, and the cap goes up. So it's not actually, as the cap goes up, Deshaun Watson's contract is less and less of a burden. So, to me, that's a huge, huge deal. And not to mention the fact you don't even take on that burden until the 2022 season when the cap goes up. So, all around, there is no lose situation. If you get Deshaun Watson, I don't care what team gets him. Let's say he gets traded. If you end up getting Deshaun Watson, you win. You win. Deshaun Watson is worth, a franchise quarterback in the top 5 is worth any amount of anything that you could ever give to a franchise, in my opinion. So, my opinion is, yes, he's worth any amount that you would pay for him, any amount of money that you would pay for him. You know, the Chiefs are doing just fine when they paid Patrick Mahomes $500 million. They're doing just fine. All right, so let's move on to this next question. This question comes from JagPack18. He says, would you like to see them stay at 3 or trade back? So I kind of read this fast. This question comes from JagPack. He says, would you like to see the Dolphins stay at 3 or trade back a few spots and get even more picks? I think if they stay in the top 10, they should do it. Yeah, I agree with that. I think they just got to pull the trigger. I mean, at 3, you can trade from 3, but not out of the top 10. If they trade with Carolina or someone like that, I'm completely fine with that because they could still get Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith. And I think if they do trade back, we know who they're going to pick at that point. Sorry, guys, I got a stuffy nose. This next question comes from Ahmed. He says, what players do you expect to return as the leaders to spark the team during significant games next year? As leaders, Kyle Van Noy, I think. I mean, he was the only real veteran defensively. Offensively, it was Ted Karras and maybe Eric Flowers and some of those guys, but I think most of those guys will be back. And if Albert Wilson comes back, he's always been a good locker room guy. So this question comes from Beef. He says, hey, Skaggs, if we were to trade Devontae Parker for a first-round pick, nothing less than that, would you do it? Yes. Yes. And I would just draft Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith or Jamar Chase in the first round. This next question comes from Take Me Out. He says, hi, Skaggs, Happy New Year. Thank you, Take Me Out. Saw your video about the possibility of Deshaun Watson trade. I absolutely love Watson and was very disappointed when we didn't draft him. That said, I'm not sure that I'd be ready to give up so much for him, only because it would limit our ability to put talent around him and end up in the same situation as the Texans. I want to stick with Tua and future picks and build something special. I disagree with that. Again, here are the biggest reasons I disagree with the argument that if you trade for Deshaun Watson, you're getting rid of all of your assets and you can't build around him. Number one, he's going to a 10-win team that is one of the youngest in the National Football League. The oldest player on the defensive side of the ball is Kyle Van Noy, who's still in his 20s. Okay? So he's going to a 10-win team unless the Dolphins shoot themselves in the head like the Texans did with some of the offseason moves that they made. they're not going to end up like the Texans. They're not giving up future first-round picks, by the way. So they're not. Next year, they're going to have a first-round pick until the 2022 season if they get Deshaun Watson. They're going to have another first-round pick. Not to mention the fact, I've said this a million times already, they still have cap space. You guys can go online and make sure that because I could be wrong about the whole thing, the Texans cap situation. If we did trade for Deshaun Watson, we wouldn't have to pay his full salary the first year. The Texans would pay most of it. The cap raises in 2022 anyway. It won't be that big of a cap hit to begin with. Okay? So that's another big reason why you would do it. The other reason and the argument that you want to keep these 2 first-round picks for the 3rd and the 18th, it's a 50-50 shot anyway that you hit on it. Okay, say we draft a tackle, say we draft Jamar Chase, say we draft Devontae Smith with a 3rd overall pick. 10 years down the line, we come back and look at and it doesn't really work out. You could have had Deshaun Watson for the next 10 years. You're not even going to, especially with some of the first round, and I'm not saying Shane and this is a hypothetical. I do believe Brian Flores and Chris Grier can handle it, these 2 first-round picks. But again, the odds and the statistics show that it's a 50-50 chance that you hit on it. And that's not even a Pro Bowler, by the way, with that 50-50 statistics, with those 50-50 statistics. So the draft isn't a guarantee to begin with. Okay, so those are some of the biggest reasons why you would still make the trade. I'm not mad at you, take me out. I just think the argument of you'll end up like the Texans and you're not going to have enough to build. You're going to have a top 4 quarterback for the next 10 years. The next 10 years. With Brian Flores, with this defense, with the cap space that the Dolphins have, with these young players that the Dolphins have. They just won 10 games. They were 1 game off of 11 wins. You only make your team better at that point. The Dolphins would have the best quarterback in their division if they draft. By the way, this also brings up a great point, bouncing off the take me out question. I was thinking about this, about the Deshaun Watson issue. This is a conspiracy theory. This is a wish, Pinocchio style, I wish upon a star with the cricket. This is what this is. This is just completely hypothetical. The best case scenario for the Dolphins if they traded for Deshaun Watson, if they somehow got Brandon Cooks and Deshaun Watson in the same deal, and maybe you have to give up an extra 3rd round pick to get Brandon Cooks, but the Texans are in a bad spot. They need draft picks. If you were somehow to get Brandon Cooks and Deshaun Watson in the same trade, which Brandon Cooks was rumored to be traded anyway, the man's been traded I don't know how many times, that would be one of the greatest trades in the history of the National Football League if the Dolphins did it. It's not even close. They get a top 4 quarterback who's only 25. They get Brandon Cooks, who's a 1,000-yard receiver repeatedly in his career, who's a deep threat, who's a great route runner. He's a really good all-around receiver. He can play in the slot if the Dolphins wanted him to. It fits everything that the Dolphins need. They killed 2 birds with 1 stone in the draft. The Texans, and this is all a conspiracy, I think they are going to trade Deshaun Watson. I think it's pretty much a nail in the coffin at this point. In my opinion, this is the conspiracy. Why? If you're like I said, I've said this before, if you're the Texans, your roster is so poor. J.J. Watt wants out of there. We've already heard those reports. The roster is so bad, and you're not getting a first-round pick for J.J. Watt. You need draft picks. They're going to trade a lot of players. I know they're not. Maybe they don't trade Deshaun Watson, but they're going to trade a lot of players off that roster. They're going to trade Deshaun Watson, in my opinion, if I had to guess, to get draft picks back. The best thing that they could do is trade with the Dolphins, because they would get Tua in that deal. But again, that's just a conspiracy. That's a hypothetical. But that would be amazing if the Dolphins were able to get those 2 players in that trade. That would be one of the greatest trades in sports history, if they were able to do that. So again, let's just, and I'm not mad at you. Take me out. I'm just passionate right now. Okay. Let's just, and here's another argument that I wanted to completely debunk. I was watching ESPN. First of all, don't watch ESPN. Don't watch it. They were saying, well, even if, you get Deshaun Watson, the offensive line. First of all, the offensive line not only was all rookies, But they got better at the end of the year. You guys saw it. The run game was significantly better at the end of the season when we played the Raiders. Even in the Bills game, we were able to run the ball a little bit, even though they didn't have some of their starters in. So that aspect of the game, and plus I think with a more scheme fit, not only for the offensive line, for the quarterback, I think the run game will be better. So the offensive line to me is already in place. Plus, Austin Jackson, Robert, in terms of pass protecting, they're amazing. And you add Deshaun Watson to that behind that offensive line. I think with some of the best, he's got some of the best pocket presence / mobility and making plays off script in the National Football League. There is not a lose situation if the Dolphins you don't lose that. You just don't. So that's my opinion on Deshaun Watson. I think to me it's and I listen. I say this. I think it's stupid not to trade for Deshaun Watson. I really do. That's just my opinion. I have a Tua jersey. I love Tua to death. Okay, I love I've loved him since he was in Alabama. Love his game, all that. But you got to do what's best for the organization. And to me, that is best. Dude, no one has ever traded a quarterback of that caliber in their prime in the history of the league. The history of the league. In one trade, and I'm going to repeat this. Let's just, in this, because this is all hypothetical. And let's say Brandon Cooks is in this trade. And we can even leave Brandon Cooks out of it. In one trade, the Dolphins get a top 4 quarterback in the entire NFL. And you can make the argument, and I will make the argument if he is a Dolphin, that Deshaun Watson would be the best quarterback in the AFC East. With Brian Flores. You have the coach, you have the quarterback. That's what everybody talks about. That's all you need. You got the coach, you got the quarterback. You got a really good young defense. What? I don't know. Like, to me, that's a perfect scenario. I could talk about this trade forever. I just don't. The argument against not doing it, to me, is not even close for the argument for doing it. It's not even a debate. It's not even a debate, in my opinion. So let's get into the next question. And then again, it's not against you taking me out. I'm just saying, to me, it's a no-brainer. This next question comes from Vegas. He says, question, Buffalo really exposed us on offense and defense. Even with this coming offseason, do you believe we can close the talent gap and unseat Buffalo? I'm so optimistic and really think the substantial jump we may make will have to come from the offense in order to make real progress. Yes, and that will happen if the Dolphins invest in their offense, and hopefully that they do. And I do agree with that they can if they get a better offense. Defensively, they need to get a pass rusher. That's something that we talked about after the Bills game in terms of matching up with them well defensively. They need to get someone there. They could get a lot. They could get Melvin Ingram. I want them to do that in free agency. I don't want them to do that in the draft. I don't think there's anyone in this draft that really pops to me. I mean, you can even see that with the 3rd overall pick. People have us taking a tackle, for God's sake. So, yeah, I think if you get Von Miller, you get Melvin Ingram, if you get one of those two in free agency, that fixes that side of the ball in terms of the matchups with the Bills. We're talking about the matchup, not defensively overall against other teams. The Bills specifically. They need another pass rusher. So I would say Von Miller. And then on the offensive side of the draft, invest in the offense to close the gap with the Bills. That was the question. From Zoe Vegas. This next question comes from Take Me Out. He says, after Najee Harris, my favorite back in the draft is Javonte Williams of North Carolina. Special player. What are your thoughts? I don't know enough about him. I would have to watch a little bit more. If I'm being honest, Take Me Out. This next question comes from Eric. He says, what are your thoughts on Jalen Waddle and Jamar Chase? I like Devontae Smith too, but I think they may be too small and needs to put on weight for the next level. You know, I disagree with that. Like Robbie Anderson, Marvin Harrison, Calvin Ridley. Those are really... Calvin's tall, but he's very skinny. Robbie Anderson's tall, and he's very skinny. Marquise Brown isn't a great example because he's not a very good receiver. But he stays relatively healthy. I think Devontae Smith is the body type and the weight doesn't really bother me that much. This next question comes from Beef. He says, "Hey Skaggs, do you think that Anthony Lynn would be a good offensive coordinator for the Dolphins? If so, do you think that is likely?" No, because he's not a good game manager. Understandably so. That in terms of like Brian, it does like on 3rd and 4th down. Brian is, or not even 3rd down, maybe mostly 4th down. Brian is going to have a significant input on whether to go for it or not. Now it's going to be up to Anthony to design a good play. But like on 3rd down and 2nd down, do I trust his game management style? I don't know. Anthony Lynn has put up great offensive numbers when I believe he was an offensive coordinator. I could be wrong. He's a good leader. Apparently, he's a good teacher, good coach. Listen, if Anthony Lynn becomes the offensive coordinator, to me, right now, that's probably my second pick, I would have to say. It's not a very deep group, mind you, but he definitely would he'd probably be second. The only thing that I don't really... Would he do a good job of building it around Tua? I don't know. I believe more on Doug Peterson a little bit more just because of the scheme that he's bringing. But I do like Anthony Lynn. I think him, he's a very run-heavy type of a guy. Obviously, he was a former running back. I believe he was. I could be wrong about that, but that's kind of what the offense is what they did with like Melvin Gordon and some of the guys that they've had up there in Los Angeles and San Diego. So yeah, I think he would probably be my second pick. Not a very creative scheme. It is not, it's not like a Sean McVay or a Kyle Shanahan or even a Doug Peterson. But I think him being a good coach, I think, is important too. This next question, in terms of what people say about him around the league and stuff. And I need to go back and look at some of his early coaching career too. So I think I'll have to get back to you on that a little bit, just to kind of really break that down. This next question comes from Tony. He says, "How should the front office go through free agency to prepare for the draft?" How should the front office go through to prepare for the draft? We talked about it a little bit. I think you have to get a pass rusher in the free agency class. In terms of pass rushers is really good. So I would say to prepare for the draft, I would say out of free agency, at least come out of it with the pass rusher. This next question comes from Vegas. He says, "Brian Flores' tenure has been a breath of fresh air to our stagnant organization. The only weakness I see with Flores' teams is the offense. He doesn't get this right for a 3rd straight year. Will this hinder his ability to become the Dolphins' long-term head coach?" No. I think we were a 10-win team with really no offense. Like, the 6 games that Tua won, or was it 7? 6 or 7? I think it was 7 because they count the Raiders game. Most of those games were won by defense. Like 90% of them. Maybe the Cardinals game is the only one. So I would say 99% of them were run because of the defensive side of the ball. So, yes, to answer the question, if we want to go to the playoffs, if we want to be a contender, yes, the offense has to be better. So I guess you're kind of right, Vegas. And hopefully it gets fixed. Doug Peterson, hopefully maybe, hopefully they invest in the draft on the offensive side of the football and really help Tua out and build around him. This next question comes from Beef. He says, "Skaggs, what do you think?" Okay, hold on. He says, "Who do you think is going to win the next round of the playoffs? Bills, Ravens, Browns, Chiefs, and probably the best game of the week, Saints, Bucks." I would probably say, if I had to guess, I would say Ravens and Chiefs are going to play in the AFC Championship. And between the Saints and the Bucks, I'd probably say in the NFC Championship it's going to be the Rams and the Saints, if I had to guess. Rematch. This first question comes from SM. He says, "If the Dolphins draft a tackle out of Oregon, who does he replace?" I would Robert Hunt. Move Robert Hunt inside. This next question comes from SM, and again, it's a ripple effect because I think we do have some pretty good young interior linemen, so that also I guess you would have really good depth there for a long time. This next question comes from SM. He says, is Krisker better at drafting defensive players or offensive players? This is a good question. This is a good one. I guess you would say defensive players. If you looked at his draft resume, it would probably be defensive players, just off the top of my head. But I don't think that means he's bad at drafting offensive players. I mean, he got Austin Jackson, he got Gaskin as his, what was it, 6th or 7th round pick. So he's not bad at drafting offensive players, I would say. We just haven't really invested in offense that much over the last 2 years, especially in the first round. So let's see here. This next question comes from Take Me Out. Well, I guess you could say last year with Austin Jackson and Tua. This next question comes from Take Me Out. He says, if the Jets draft the tackle out of Oregon and you had the opportunity to trade back with the Lions for the 7th overall pick and their 2021 ones and twos, would you? Yeah, that would be a yes. Yes, of course I would do that. I think this is a very real possibility if the Jets would draft the tackle out of Oregon and stick with Darnold. That is a great scenario. Yes, if that would be done by the Lions if they did that, but yeah, I would definitely do that. I mean, we're literally trading to the 7th pick and we're gonna get one of the receivers and an extra first round pick. That's a steal. This next question comes from Vegas. He says, is Devontae Smith worthy of the 3rd overall pick if the Oregon tackle is off the board, or should we sign free agents like Curtis Samuel, Kenny Golladay to fill the voids? No, Devontae Smith, I would say, is worth it. Same thing with Jamar Chase. I think they're both pretty good. This next question comes from Jag Pack. He says, what do you think about Kadarius Toney from Florida? I don't hear a lot of people talking about him. He was very impressive against Bama in the SEC championship. Yeah, I saw that. He was pretty good. I don't know. I'd have to watch a little bit more. He seems kind of similar to Devontae Parker in a way, where most of those catches were 50-50 balls. This next question comes from Richard. He says, who will be the backup quarterback for the 2021 season? Fitzpatrick probably won't be back. How about Jacoby Brissett or Andy Dalton? Or draft Wake Forest quarterback Jamie Newsom in the later round. I don't know. I don't think you can go. I would rather have a veteran quarterback. So maybe Fitz comes back. I would love for Fitz to come back. So maybe Fitz. I would say. We'll see how that all shakes out. This next question comes from Ethan. He says, hey Skaggs, Tua projects his projected 16-game stats are 64% completion percentage, almost 3,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 174 rushing yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns. 32 sacks seems pretty solid to me. I think I need a little bit better than that in today's game. At least in the 20s. Yeah, at least in the 20s. And hopefully we can get there with some of the moves that we make. This next question comes from Vegas. He says, what do we need on the defensive side besides a nose tackle and a middle linebacker? I think we need a more athletic slot corner. I think we're okay on corner. I don't think we need anything, and we don't need it. Pass rusher, I think, is the number one thing. I think you get Von Miller, you get Melvin. That's, to me, by far the biggest thing this team needs. Because the Bills are obviously the AFC's champions right now. And if we want to beat them, we have to have someone who can who can make a play in the front seven in the passing game on a more consistent basis. And who can really free up Ogba and Shaq Lawson a little bit more. This next question comes from Dog. He says, who do you think we should hire as offensive coordinator? I think Doug Peterson would be a really good offensive coordinator. So I would say Doug Peterson. This question comes from Ethan. He says, what are your top free agent signings the Dolphins should try and acquire? This is a good one. We're going to do an entire thing about this. But I would say the guys that come off, and there's probably some sleepers in there. But the guys that come right off, to me, Von Miller to me is number one. If we can get Von Miller, the defense is out of this world. I would say 2 is probably going to be Juju Smith-Schuster. I think he would be perfect. I don't really. Aaron Jones is somewhere in the top 6 or 5. I'm not totally sold on that. I would rather draft like Najee Harris. I think that would be a way better solution to that problem. So I would say Aaron Jones isn't really in there. I would say 3 and 4 are it's between Melvin Ingram and probably Patrick Peterson. I see. So I think my top 4 would be Von Miller, Melvin Ingram, Juju Smith-Schuster. Who's the fourth? Oh, and Patrick Peterson. I think those guys. And maybe you throw in Devin McCourty in there as a 5. So I think those are probably the biggest guys that I think could make a difference for the Dolphins for sure. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I think, and again, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with the offensive coordinator, especially with Doug being fired. It's going to be interesting to see where he goes and what the heck his coaching market is. I don't know. We'll see. But whether the Dolphins get Deshaun or Tua, they're gonna be really good next year. It doesn't matter what they do. And I hope to God, if we do keep Tua, if we get this is the dream scenario. If we get Doug Peterson, and we invest heavily in the offensive side of the football, I think you get Najee Harris, Jalen Waddle, and let's say Devontae Smith or Jamar Chase in rounds 1 and 2, because I think you could get Jalen Waddle in the second round due to the injury. That's a dream scenario for Tua. And if you put them in Doug Peterson's offense, the sky is the limit, in my opinion. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Let me know what you guys think about the potential of Doug Peterson. And some of the, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things this offseason that could happen, or who knows what will happen. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I am Skaggs83, and I will see you guys in the next one.